your show. I'm going to, of course, share the slides afterwards. And if you have questions, we have some time at the end as well. But I'm here for you. You know, we're not alone. And I love that Fabian was just talking about building community and how important it is to build the innovation community. So innovation, right? What does it even mean? It's a big word that gets thrown around a lot and means very different things to different people. For me, it's about creating, right? Innovus means bringing something new in, right? So it's really about creation and creativity and creating something, because all life creates, right? Every tree creates cells, and every tree grows, right? Every animal creates, every human creates. We're all creators, right? But innovation is doing it consciously and really bringing in something that is of meaning, right? And there's no right way to do this, right? There's no perfect tool. There's no perfect canvas that you can fill out that will guarantee success, right? There's no right way to do innovation. People do it in very, very different ways. And because there's no right way, the only thing we can do is to reduce innovation risk, right? We can make sure that we eliminate some of the risks to innovation on our path for a new business model or for a new idea that we're trying to bring into the market. And what are some of those risks? Well, there's all kinds of them, but in my world, I like quadrants, typical consultant stuff, right? Interior, exterior, collective, and individual. So those are kind of like a simple way to think about the different risks that we have when we create innovation. And initially, of course, most organizations just looked at, let's create some new products, right? And they made sure that it made sense for the organization, that they, fit with their strategy, fit with their product portfolio, that they had the capacities. And for years, companies would spend millions of dollars in R&D and create all kinds of cool projects, and then realize nobody actually wanted it. So as innovation professionals, you already know, right? We have beautiful things like design thinking to make sure that the customer actually wants this, right? And so companies have learned that before they spend millions of dollars on some new product and widget and rolling it out, that they maybe should ask somebody if they want it in the first place. And that is really important to them. And there's another dimension of risk, and that's kind of been ignored a little bit in the past. And I think it's a really important dimension, though. One is the impact on the ecosystem, right? Does it make sense for a collective future? At this point, the future of work is working on the future. If your company is not actively contributing to a better future, what are you doing? Right? If you're just going to work to come up with a new cool thing, who cares? If it's taken away from our planet, not a good idea. Right? But finally, there's this fourth risk, and that's the entrepreneur herself, right? The people who are actually pushing innovation inside of organizations, because anybody who's done that knows it's really, really hard. Right? You're going to get a lot of no's, you're going to get punched in the face repeatedly. So you have to make sure that it really matters to the person, right? That they actually care about the solution and that they have the drive to make it happen going forward, where it's not just about a cool new thing they're introducing, but something really meaningful. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail. With the ecosystem, it's kind of obvious, right? There's this beautiful blue marble that we all get to live on, and it's actually more like a spaceship, right? If you think about it, we're in the spaceship in the middle of space, because outside of Earth, not so good for humans. And I know Musk wants to go to Mars, but it's a very hostile environment up there, not really pleasant. I think beautiful mountains and trees are much, much nicer than what it says on Mars. But the problem is our spaceship is on fire right now. Right? If you look at the planetary boundaries, all these different parts about our ecosystem, we've just passed the 6th boundary this year. Right? So there's some major things going on that we need to address. So for an innovation to be meaningful, right, it has to make sure that it doesn't take away from our future, that it doesn't waste resources, and doesn't have a negative impact on planet and life. Because right now, I consider myself an optimist. I would say we have about a 50-50 chance for humanity to survive by 2050. And my brother just had a kid that just turned 1 year old. I just turned 50. I would love for that kid to be 50 years old too, right? So let's make sure that we do innovation that's actually good for our future. Then, of course, there's the organization. And organizational level, it's really a change that's happening here, right? Because when you look at this progression, I'm not going to go too much into detail here, but this whole last decades have been about optimizing, right? After the Industrial Revolution, we've began to integrate our systems, create enterprise resource planning systems like SAP. We've optimized the shit out of them. Pardon me for swearing, but we've optimized the shit out of our processes to the point where they're very, very efficient, but they're not resilient. And that's what we've seen during COVID even, right? When suddenly all these processes broke down. So we need to actually move towards learning, right? And becoming learning systems as an organization that continuously evolve and continuously create new solutions. And the whole metaphor of an organization has shifted, right? In the past, we talked about this big tanker, right? And it's so hard to steer the tanker. And, if you make a good career, you might actually make it up there somewhere and don't just shovel coal, but you might be the captain of the ship and then tell everybody where to go, right? But that's not the truth anymore. The truth is becoming more like a drone swarm, right? Where each member of the organization is ultimately in part of the system, and we need a common purpose, a common vision to direct it, so we can direct that swarm in a direction where we want to go. So we have a changing operating metaphor with AI in particular now that can take over a lot of the repeatable processes in an organization, that humans don't need to do that anymore, but we can instead focus on the creativity and the genius that humans can bring to the table. And, so here I'm not going to go too much into detail again. I'm going to share the slides with you. But the key is that really every business model or every product is now somewhere in the spectrum between idea and obsolescence. Right? It's not about core business versus innovation. That's one of the stupid dualisms we hold in our head. Here's our core business and here's innovation. And we do this over here with the cool, funny furniture. But over here, better not touch our core business. Right? But to understand that it's all a spectrum. And every business model is somewhere in the spectrum, from idea to then being a potential, or there is something here, to a committed thing, we're like, you're going to do this, to then mature it and accelerate it and grow it, to ultimately integrate it into what's your core business. But even there, to then look at what can we do beyond what's there right now? How can we expand on what we just learned? This is what Amazon is really good at, right? They start selling books and then they start selling everything else. And then they realized that their service were really good. So they made their service, and now AWS makes more money than Amazon, actually, right? So expanding from models, but then eventually also sunsetting them. But the key with this innovation that I want to focus on today is that there's a 90% drop here. Right? And that 90% drop is for many reasons. Most startups fail, and most internal projects fail as well. But there's multiple different reasons. Sometimes it's simply because there's no money in it, right? Or it might be because it's not aligned with strategy. Like one of the entrepreneurship programs that T-Mobile, for example, had, they said, do whatever you want. And people came up with all kinds of businesses that had nothing to do with T-Mobile, right? So if it's not aligned with strategy, it will also very quickly die, right? And of course, if you can't build the required capacities, it's another thing, right? If you see that there's something there, but you're not fast enough to actually build up your own capacities, also a reason for why projects might fail. Then, of course, the customer, we've talked about this already with design thinking, and I probably don't have to tell all of you about this because you're all experts, right? But here it's simply about nobody wants this maybe, right? Or they don't get the value from it, or they might get value from it, but they're not willing to pay for it. Like think about Twitter, for example, where people are like, this is kind of cool, but wow, you're going to charge me now? Nah, I'm out of here, right? And since Elon took over, it's become crap anyway, right? So if they don't see the value or they're not willing to pay for it, also not going to work, right? But today I wanted to focus in on this last risk, right? Because it's about innovation and authentic cultures, right? And the entrepreneur. And for entrepreneurs, the risk here is that it's meaningless drudgery. It's just a job. I'm just going to work every day and I'm slogging through, I'm just doing the thing, but I don't really care about it, right? Or there's interpersonal conflicts where I can't deal with the people in my team, right? And actually in Germany, and I'm sure it's similar here, where you're at, is that 65% of people are stressed at work and 45% of that because of interpersonal conflict. Right, so most of the stress we have at work, where we spend most of our time, right, that's where we have these issues with our colleagues, right? And then obviously, ultimately, burnout and depression that can happen when you do not really work from a proper place, right? And so we need new kinds of cultural operating systems, right? And when I talk about cultural operating systems in an organization, that means we need a new type of leadership. We need a new collaboration skills of how we interact with each other. We need new processes for innovation everywhere. So it's not just an innovation department, but your job as innovation professionals is actually not just do innovation, but facilitate innovation throughout the organization. Like take, for example, salespeople. They're some of your best sensors technically, right? Because they're talking to customers every day. But very few of them have learned to even ask you a question and say, hey, what's working for you there? What's not working for you there? Right? How are you doing this? Right? They actually could technically be the best people to spot opportunities. Right? But most of them have never been trained. So we need to figure out as innovation professionals now how to encourage everyone in the organization to look at their own job and say, what can I do better here? Right? Then we need new structures for accountability and action. We need new understanding of how we have a continuous evolution of business models, what I mentioned a moment ago, right? That everything is on that spectrum somewhere between idea and sunset. And ultimately also understand that our internal culture is now also a brand, Right? When people talk about employer branding, right, it's kind of this extra thing over here where in the old days you could have a really shitty culture, but out there you would say, hey, we're the best company to work for. And people would come in and then be like, oh shit, what happened here, right? But that's not the case anymore. Now we actually see what's happening in organizations too, right? You can't hide anymore. Right? So this is all changing. But it's all about culture, right? And culture is another one of those big words that gets thrown around a lot. When I first started a company 15 years ago for cultural, consulting, people looked at me and they're culture consulting? You mean like opera and theater and stuff like that and art? I said, no, 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 how you work together, how you create together. And they said, is that like the soft skills? This like stuff that we, do for the girls, yeah, when we have some extra money, we might do something like that one day, right? But they didn't understand that culture is simply how we do things around here, right? And you have a culture in your family, you have a culture in your team, you have a culture in your department, you have a culture in your organization, we have a culture in a nation, right? We have culture as a planetary species even, right? So it's how we do things around here. And there's a shift happening, and it's not just a change, it's a transformation, right? And the change is, continuous, right? It's like the same old plus, right? But the same old plus is not going to get us there, right? Because the same old plus right now will continue to destroy our planet and destroy the psyches of the employees that we have, right? Already now work wasn't working. So when COVID happened and people started talking about new work and future of work, right? Nobody wanted to go back to what used to be happening, right? So we're in the middle of this transformation. And it's kind of weird because transformation is when something ceases to exist in point A, like what was isn't anymore, and what will be isn't yet. And you're in between going, right, having a major freak out because you don't know what's happening, right? You're in the middle of this transformation, but this is how you create something discrete and something truly new, right? So if you want to create something truly new, you have to go away from just trying to change. Right? And this is some of the hardest things when I work in companies. Like the moment of this morning, I was working with a team at Siemens, for example. And the hardest thing is to get them out of what already exists, right? Instead of just making that incrementally better, to really think about what do we want to have in the world? What do we want to really create here? Right? So it's a transformation. And organizational transformation or systemic transformation is always also personal transformation, right? We have to change as individuals and begin to look as individuals, as humans, not just as employees, right? This is one of the big things that's shifting, is that we don't just need a good bunch of people to execute on a defined strategy. We need, real humans here, right? So innovation, thank you, Fabian, right, is about personal transformation too, right? I have to shift. And when I transform something, there's always resistance, right? Because we've done this so many years, we've done this so many decades. So I've been like this my whole life, right? And of course, you're going to defend that, right? When something new comes in, there's going to be some defense mechanisms against it, right? The corporate immune system on a systemic level. And on a personal level, it's really hard to change habits sometimes, right? Some of them easier than others. But there's some resistance, so we need some tools here as well. And this is really about looking at yourself as sort of this laboratory, right? Looking at this is from alchemy, right? And in alchemy, some of you might have heard about it. Alchemy, typically, they talk about turning lead into gold, right? Which is really turning the material experience into beauty and wisdom. Because the first rule of alchemy is that the alchemist needs to do to herself what they're doing to the matter. So if I'm burning something or dissolving something or chopping something up, that's actually what I have to do to myself. I have to burn and frustrate my own needs and desires sometimes. I have to learn to let go and dissolve my ego and let go of who I was yesterday for who I could become tomorrow, right? I have to chop things up sometimes. Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, babies in the house. All right. Hi, little one. That's our future. That's why we're doing this, right? That's why we're doing innovation here. It's for them, right? But it's about creating yourself, right? Creating yourself again and again and thinking about who you want to become. Because there's only one corner in the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. Right? I can't fix the world. I can't fix the war in Israel, Palestine. I can't fix Ukraine. I can't fix, the politicians around the world that are abusing people's fear to get into power right now. Right? I can't fix that, but I can do something here. And that's really the only place where I can do something. And this is where leadership comes in. Right? And I think an important distinction to make is the difference between management and leadership. They get thrown around a lot and mixed up a lot, and everybody who is sort of up in the organization is called a leader. But I would doubt that most of them are, honestly. Right? Most of them are good managers. They know how to distribute work. That's what management is all about. Right? Leadership is about then enabling and developing people to do that work. Right? So leadership is really not about stuff or tasks or projects. Leadership is about enabling people. Right? First and foremost, yourself. Right? This is where it starts. You have to first align yourself and learn, how can I be more creative? What's in the way of my creativity? What's in the way of my creative power? Right? Not just the creativity of ideation and coming up with cool new ideas, but to actually bring it all the way down, to make something real of it, right? Because every force has a counterforce, right? And creativity is counterforce is resistance. So you might have this great idea of what you want to do, but then the doubt comes in of saying, oh, who am I to do this? Am I good enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Do I know how to do this? Right? Or maybe I can do it tomorrow. Tomorrow is fine, right? So this is where we get to learn first to lead ourselves. And then we can support other people in their own creative process, right? We can help them and support them in eliminating what's in the way of their creation, right? So that they can then do it for others. In my company, we like to say that leaders create leaders who create leaders, right? That we all support each other and ultimately create environments where leadership is a process of expanding the capacity to create in yourself and others. We want to create environments where we do that for each other, where we hold each other accountable to who we can be. Right? As humans today, we can be so much. If you look at human history, we've done so much already. Right? If we hold each other accountable to that standard, a lot of people would have to really step up. Right? I know myself, I get to step up every day. Right? Again, this is where it starts, right? Leading yourself. And culture then is an emergent phenomena. Right? How you show up determines how your team functions. Right? You might have had the situation where you're in a meeting and everybody's like super excited, right, and having a good time. And this one person comes in, some executive on the phone, and goes, "What's going on here? What are you doing?" And suddenly the whole thing tanks, right, and the whole mood goes to shit, right? Or conversely, you might have had the experience where you're stuck as a team and nothing is working, and then one person goes, "Hey, but we can do this. Come on, guys!" And suddenly everybody feels better, right? Because how everybody shows up determines the culture. Right? We're like a drop in water that has rings around it. And culture happens in this in between where all of our rings meet. That's where culture is. That's why actually 80% of cultural transformation programs at big 5 consulting companies do fail, right? Because they look at culture as a thing. They say, oh, we're a people company, and they put a nice plaque and poster on the wall of we're a people company, right? But actually statistics show that most of the time, the actual values that companies put on their banner are the ones that they live the least, right? When people say, we're all about customer focus and diversity, most of the time they're really not, right? And so this is where, again, we need to individually show up, because if we individually care about these things, suddenly we all care about these things. And there's a lot of things changing in culture right now on the planet, right? One is that things are becoming more transparent. We can see each other now, right? We're sitting across from the ocean right now, very far, thousands of kilometers away, but we can see each other. And I can turn on a webcam and I can see what it looks like in different places in the world, right? And we see each other now also in our daily lives, right? And we're becoming much more transparent. And with that comes a lot of diversity, which we actually need, because we have big problems, so we need multiple perspectives on things, right? But diversity is still a little hard for people to swallow sometimes, because we're so used to doing what's like me, right? And if there's something that's not like me, much, much harder to connect to. But it's important, and we see each other, we see these multiple perspectives now. Right? And diversity for me is a bigger thing than what's usually talked about. For me, diversity means 8 billion people, right? 8 billion individuals, 8 billion, because in set theory, you can make whatever little groups you want to, or subgroups of diversity, but in the end, we have 8 billion people to figure out how to live together. And in that, we need to focus on our values, especially now that AI has come to a level where it's as smart as most humans, in the sense of spitting back what is the right answer, right? But it's not, it doesn't have values on its own. Right? And AI can be used for good or evil. It's just a tool. So we need to actually now look at what's actually important to us. What are our values? Right? And really clarify that for ourselves. So we can then make good agreements. Right? If you think about most of the organizations, that all the repeatable businesses will be automated. There will going to be automated contracts, right? Smart contracts on a blockchain somewhere. Right? But they're going to be executed like this. So we need to learn how to make good contracts with each other too, right? And good agreements. And there's more consequence, right? Today, when you do something, a minute later, it's on Twitter or on YouTube or on TikTok, right? So you have to be really clear about the consequences of your actions. And in that, we become more aware of our ecosystems around us too, right? We're becoming more aware of the fact that what we've been doing to our planet. And ultimately, there's been a shift towards purpose, right? For many people during COVID, it was the first time that they thought about death. It was the first time they thought about, oh, I could touch this and I could get sick and I could die. Oh my God, I could die. And hopefully that's not a news to you, but you will probably die one day, right? And at that point, you're going to look back at your life and see all these moments that have happened, right? Like walking through a museum of your life and you see all these pictures. And what were your moments like? And did you use it for something? Or are you going to be able to, are you going to be able to die one day saying, I lived my best life that I could. I did something meaningful here. So these are happening in our culture. And as a result of it, we actually thought about, okay, what do we need now in terms of team cultures to enable that, right? We need to create authenticity and have moments where we can be authentic. For diversity, we need psychological safety so that everybody feels included and connected. Right? For values, we need to make sure we learn how to clarify things and become really clear about things. For contracting, I already mentioned, we need to learn how to make good agreements, right? And then also be able to give each other feedback when the agreements are not working, right? So we can become aware of the consequences of what we're creating. And coming from a place of care, right? Care for ourselves, care for each other, care for this planet, care for life, right? From a place of care, really deeply caring, right? And Nora said some values have been lost. Absolutely. But if you think about the olden days, and of course they had their own difficulties, right? And there was lots of things that were worse than they are today. And overall, we're actually doing better as humanity than we've ever done before. But there are some beautiful things in the past that we've kind of lost, which is why a lot of these demagogues are succeeding with, let's go back to the past and make it great again, right? Because people remember that some things were simpler and easier, and there was more time, and there was more family, and there was more connection that we've kind of lost, right? We've had now all these amazing digital tools to connect, and people are more disconnected than ever, right? And so it's important that we learn to care again. Mhm. And ultimate purpose is all about purpose. And I'm going to go into some of these in more detail, especially because we talked about authentic cultures. So I want to kind of focus on authenticity and psychological safety today. And authenticity is another one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, right? Oh, we want to be more authentic. What does it even mean, right? What does it mean to be authentic? Right? The actual word comes from Greek autohentes, and it means self-doing, right? It's someone following their own authority. And this is a scary thought. This is what churches in the past and governments and organizations have done their very best to depress and to keep down. Right? In these command and control structures, the authority is up there, and you better follow the authority above you. Right? That's what we learn in school. The teacher has the right answer. You don't have the right answer. You have to learn what they say and spit it back to them. In university, professor has the right answer, and you just spit it back to them. And then you get a job description, and your boss knows what's right, and he's going to tell you what to do. Right? And everybody else has authority. And this is the interesting thing about human development, right? When you look at the different stages, 65% of adults are on a socialized level or below. That means they're still looking for external authority to validate them, to tell them if they're okay or not. But you probably see that when you do innovation with people and you give them a canvas and they ask you, like, how do I fill this out right? And it's like, there's no right way to fill out this canvas, right? There's a tool, method behind it, an idea behind it, but then it's up to you to really care about a customer problem and use these tools to create something from there. But it's following your own authority. And this is that shift from the tanker to the drone swarm, right? Because now I need people to know what their values are and have them act on their values, right? And it's a process, right? Authenticity starts with self-care. I have to acknowledge that I have needs, and then I need to get to address these needs and be honest about them. Right? In the past, people would check their personality at the door when they come to work. Right? They had to be a good functioning employee. And if your body was aching or you had problems physically or you were emotionally not so good, just suck it up and do it anyway. Right? But this is where we have to learn how to say, no, you know what? Today I'm going to take care of my body. Because if I don't take care of it, who will? Right? If you don't do it, who's going to take care of your needs? Right? So the first step is to actually actively engage in self-care. The next step is then to learn how to self-regulate. right? How to adopt new good habits that are serving you, and how to let go of habits that maybe not serve you so well. Right? And that's a tricky thing, learning habits. Really good book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and some other researchers talk about these little 1% changes, right? Like learning how to do something a little bit more. Like if you want to go running, don't commit to, I'm going to run every morning, right? Commit to putting your shoes out at night, right? And in the morning, at least you put your shoes out. And next day, maybe you actually put them on. And on day 3, you maybe actually go to the front door. And on day 4, you maybe actually get out of the house. And on day 5, you go running, right? But to build this slowly, right? To build habits slowly. So it's a key for authenticity is to learn how to regulate yourself. And then ultimately how to cultivate yourself. Right? We all have an ideal version of who we would like to be. Right? If you think about this idealized version that you think you could be, right? Most of the time we use it to put ourselves down. Most of the time we use it to criticize ourselves and to say, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not that yet. But that's the whole point of having an aspiration, is that you're not that yet, but you're still on your way there, right? And so you want to use an image of yourself, right? Think about who you want to become next and use that as an inspirational tool to get those shoes out and go running maybe one day, right? But to put it as an inspirational tool, right? Because you're the number one. Nobody's ever done you before. Right? The next time you criticize yourself for how bad you are, how you're not doing good enough, or how you're not, smart enough, or this enough, or that enough, remember that nobody's ever been you. You're the very first version of you. So there's no right way to be you either, right? You're still figuring that out, and that's okay, right? But to have something that you're orienting yourself on is important. There's a beautiful saying that if you're not a little embarrassed by who you were a year ago, you haven't grown enough, right? And so you want to set yourself some aspiration for who I want to become next, right? So that you can have an aim for. And it's a constant process, right? For us in general, leadership is a constant process. And it starts with awareness, right? Really looking at how can I expand what I'm aware of every day? How can I learn more? How can I see more? How can I look at myself and all my bullshit and shadows and dark sides as well, right? Be willing to look at those, right? And look at the world and increase our awareness. And then choose what we're going to take responsibility for. And responsibility often gets confused with guilt. It's not about guilt. Right? It's about actually being able to respond to something. So while guilt is a victim situation, responsibility is actually empowering. You're responsible. You're able to respond to something. Right? Taking responsibility for something is an empowering act, because then it leads to, when you do it regularly, it leads to ownership. That's really what you want to be. You want to be in ownership of your life, right? Of all your relationships and whether they're working or not. Right? So I want to be in ownership of that, because then you can choose who I want to be, choose my identity, and choose who I want to be next, because that identity then has new actions available to them that ultimately can create new outcomes. Right? But being in this constant process of awareness, okay, what do I know about myself? How can I take responsibility for that? And as I'm doing that, I'm in ownership and I'm now choosing my next level identity, right? Who I'm cultivating myself to be, because then I have new actions available and can create new outcomes. Some of you who are familiar with coaching models, that's pretty much the foundation of ontological coaching, right? Like the observer has actions available to them that can create certain outcomes. If I want to create different outcomes, I can try and change my actions, but I'm always going to be limited by my idea of who I am. So I have to expand my idea of who I am, so I have new actions available to me that can create these new outcomes. But I said, it all starts with yourself, and it does, right? This is the only place I can change. But if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together, right? We're here, we're together. And with innovation too, there's this idea of this single brilliant inventor who came up with this new product, right? But in the end, it was always a team. Right? There's always a team behind it. It's always some people that you will need. When I say that community is really the key, and I always say, forget networking, focus on community. Right? In community are two kinds of people: the people that you can support and the people who can support you in supporting more of them. Right? So as you look at your network on LinkedIn, really think about who am I here to support and who is here to support me in supporting more people. Right? Who can be together with me in this? Because in the end, culture is about collaboration, right? And really creating together. Right? And this is a new capacity of collaborating amidst rapid transformation. And I mentioned diversity before, and diversity is one of those things where, we all kind of say we should have it, right? But most people don't like it, right? Because if something is different from me, then, I have a hard time with it. Right? But there's this beautiful story of from India about the blind man and the elephant. And it goes like this way: a bunch of blind men are walking down the street, and the first one hits something, and he's like, oh, and he puts his hands up and he says, oh, guys, we hit a wall. There's a wall. And the next one is a little bit down by the leg, and he's like, no, guys, that's a tree. It's a tree. Right? And the third one is on the ear, and he's like, no, it's a palm. And the fourth has the trunk, and he thinks it's a snake. And then they get into a fist fight, beating each other up about who's right. And I see a lot of that with our politicians or in meetings, right, where people are all sitting there fighting each other about who's right. But the whole point is none of us can see the elephant. Right? We're all a bunch of blind men. All I can see is what it looks like from over here. And all you can see is what it looks like from over there. Right? And when we actually, instead of fighting about who's right now, say, okay, cool, what do you see? Oh, you see this? Oh, cool. Well, I see this. Okay. And then we can maybe begin to grasp that the elephant is there. Right? But we're actually interested in each other's perspectives. And we understand that nobody knows what's really going on, that I can only ever see my part in it, and you can ever only see yours. But together, we can see so much more. And to do that, we require psychological safety. Right? Growth and development require that. And psychological safety is another one of those words that became very popular in the last couple of years, right? When Google published a study on called Project Aristotle, and they found that, because they looked into what makes a high-performing team, what are our best teams, what are they like, and they looked at diversity, they looked at skills, they looked at age, they looked at all the typical factors, and they couldn't find anything. And then they went one level deeper into culture. Culture, Jesus, that thing, right? But then they found that psychological safety was actually the #1 indicator for high-performing teams. Right? And psychological safety is a shared belief amongst members of a group that it is safe for them to share opinions and be their true selves without fear of backlash or belittlement. But Amy Edmondson's definition, she's one of the inventors in that sense of the term psychological safety, one of the first to research it. And she found that, and since then, there's been a lot of work around psychological safety, and it's been linked to motivation, to open-mindedness, to risk-taking, to speaking up, to resilience, to persistence, to humor, to divergent thinking, to solution finding, and creativity. We're talking about here, right? So psychological safety is required for all of these things, and it required / positively impacts all of those things. And in the end, it just means I can be myself, right? Freaky, colorful, weird. I can be myself, you can be yourself, we can be ourselves. And then we can figure things out from there, instead of constantly pretending we're someone else, trying to live up to people's expectations. And you know what it feels like when you don't have it, right? It's like the easiest way. Think about the time when, you maybe were at the party, right? Oh, the Little Prince had that beautiful, I love the Little Prince. But, but it feels like not to have psychological safety, right? Imagine you were in a party somewhere and there's a bunch of people standing around, you just walk up to them and they all ignore you. Right? Or when someone takes their work, like a boss, and takes your work and presents it as their own. Right? Those kind of moments when, or you made a mistake and get punished for it. Right? And in every one of those moments when we don't feel safe, what happens in our brain is that our amygdala, which is this little part inside of our limbic system, flips and says, "Ooh, danger." Right? And it's constantly, amygdala's job is to constantly look out for danger. What's potentially dangerous? What's potentially dangerous? What's potentially dangerous? And as soon as it sees danger, it flips. And 1,400 different chemicals get released into your body, adrenaline, including cortisol, some of those other chemicals that are stress chemicals. And some of it can be good, like if there's a dangerous situation, you want some adrenaline to be really awake and present to the situation. Right? But when you do it all the time, not so good for your system. Right? I mean, actually 70% of doctors' visits were linked to stress directly in a research by Harvard Medical Review a few years ago. 70% of doctor visits. So most of our diseases come from being stressed. Because when we get stressed, we have these 4 different responses. The oldest one is freeze. Right? It's like the chameleon that just sits there and says, "Oh, I hope they don't see me." Whereas when you ignore the email in your inbox, when you procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate, and procrastination is actually a stress response. A lot of people beat themselves up for being procrastinators, but procrastination is a stress response. Right? It's actually freezing. Right? And then when you realize, okay, cool, they've seen me, you go and try and run away. Right? And you go into flight mode, you try and escape. And in modern day, it looks like, oh, let's go get a new job. What's online? Let's go find a new job, or or get drunk tonight. You know what I mean? That's also an option to escape. Right? And if that's not an option, then you fight. Right? And some people, idiots out there, are still doing this with rockets and hitting each other over the head with stones and sticks. But most of the time in modern day life, it's blaming, right? Because when you don't feel good, it has to be someone's fault. And so you're going to start making up stories about why you feel bad. And it's either their fault or my fault, right? Depending on your kind of constitution, you'll either blame everybody else and they're all, it's these people and those people and these people and my boss and these teammates, right? And you start pointing fingers at everybody. Or you will say, oh, I'm stupid, I'm shitty, I'm an idiot, I'm not good enough. Right? Some of you might know how that feels. Right? And then there's the last response, is just fawning, which is compromising. Right? Like trying to negotiate, to say, hey, I'll do whatever, just let me get through this. Just tell me what to say and I'll be okay. Right? You might know that from your personal relationships and partnerships sometimes. Right? When you get to that point of like, just honey, whatever you want. You know what I mean? But it's in the work, it's the same thing. When now we call it quiet quitting. Right? When people actually show up for work and they kind of do what they need to do, but they're already halfway checked out. Right? 40% of people were looking this summer, the statistic, were looking for a new job. Right? 40%. That's for half of our workforce, nearly. Right? Looking for a new job, trying to renegotiate here. So there's a couple of different aspects of psychological safety, and there's a really lovely book by Dr. Timothy Clark, which I think is kind of the gold standard at the moment after Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, and it's like super thin, so if you want to learn about it, it's worthwhile read. It's very short, but he talks about these 4 different aspects of psychological safety. The first one being inclusion safety. Right? We want to feel part of a group. Like the best way to destroy psychological safety in an organization is to announce that you're going to have layoffs. Because now your best performers are going to start looking for a new job because they think you're not doing so well in your company. And your worst performers, they're going to dig in and be like, nah, nobody knows how I do my job, and it better stays that way because then I have job safety. Mm-hmm. So inclusion safety is the first one. We want to be part of a group. Right? And you can do simple things like when you're standing around at a party and someone walks up, you simply go, hey, come on in, you're welcome here. Right? Creating inclusion safety, bringing people on. Right? Even when I said at the beginning, we're all part of Team Human. Right? There was part of me saying, hey, we're all on the same team here. Right? Nobody's excluded. We're all human. Right? And then I said, we're all learning still. Right? The next level of psychological safety is learner safety. That it's okay to make a mistake. And think back to when you were a kid. Like, how did your parents or teachers react when you made a mistake? That will make a big difference. If they made you wrong, if they punished you, you'll probably, be afraid of learning. This is why most people stop learning. Right? Because not knowing in our societies is often connected with shame. Right? So I better not say anything or not try anything, because if I do it wrong, I have to be ashamed. I think if 65% of Americans don't read another book after they graduate college. As college people, it's not even the majority of Americans. Right? Like 65% of Americans who went to college never read another book afterwards. They're happy not to have to learn again. And think of how many people think, hey, once I did my university degree and I got my job, I don't have to learn anything. We're going to just do the same job until I'm 65 and then I die and play some golf before that and then I die, right? But it's not true. We always have to learn, right? So making it okay to make a mistake, super important for innovation, especially innovation, right? Because when you innovate, you're going to be wrong most of the time, right? So you have to make it okay to be wrong. Celebrate your fuck up nights, right? Celebrate your moments when you go, hey, this is what I learned this week because it was really horrible. In my team, we do a lot of retros, right? Where we look at what didn't work this week and celebrate what didn't work this week and what we learned from that. So learner safety, second aspect. The third is contributor safety. And I mentioned earlier the example of someone that taking your work for your own, right? Or presenting your work as their own. We want to feel appreciated for what we're contributing. And so one of the simplest ways of how you can create a really good contribution culture in your organization or in your team is to acknowledge people, right? Let them know you see them. To say, hey, I saw how hard you worked on this. I saw the extra effort that you put into this. I thought it was really cool that you called that customer and that you called these 10 people, right? Keep acknowledging people for their contribution, right? Because that's our self-esteem, right? And so we want to have that to feel safe, is that we know that what we bring to the table is going to be appreciated. And then the fourth one is challenger safety, that I can actually say what's not okay. I can speak up around when it's not okay. And I mentioned earlier, psychological safety is connected to speaking up. Right? So we have to be able to say what's not okay as well. And psychological safety then allows us to have clarity. Right? It's okay to ask questions, even dumb questions, when I don't understand something. So it's actually the prerequisite for clarity. And on the other hand, clarity actually creates psychological safety too. When I know what's up and I know what's going on around me, I feel more safe. Right? But I need clarity to then make good agreements, right? So we can make good agreements with each other, and then also have the opportunity to give each other feedback when these agreements don't work out. Right? And we're going to share a little thing, a distinction between feedback and feed forward, right? Because feedback really looks at the past, feed forward looks in the future. Right? So if you want to create innovation and openness in your team, focus always on the future. Right? Instead of criticizing past behavior, ask, who could you be next time? What could you do next time? How could you do this differently next time? Who could you be next time? Right? To inspire aspiration in people. Right? And not focus on what happens, but what you do next time. Right? What can we do about this next time? How can we do this better next time? Right? And not focus on the mistakes, but focus on the learning aspect of it. Right? Really key for innovation, that we learn something. Nelson Mandela said, I never lose, I either win or learn. Right? You're always learning. And the last one is that, in feedback, you tell the person all the things that they did wrong. And feed forward, you ask them, what do you think you could do better next time? And you have them tell you. Because if I tell you, do this next time, then it's my thing that you might or might not adopt. But if I ask you, what could you do next time? And I tell you what I could do next time, then it's mine. Right? It's like that I think of like, make it seem like it's their idea. Right? But this is one way of how you can create a culture that encourages innovation as well. And always from a place of care. Right? Don't give people feedback because you're pissed off at them. Give them feedback for their own growth, right? To make it about them, not about you. Right? And after, thank you for after the feed forward action plan, exactly what could be done differently next time. Right? And how can we get back to purpose? How can we get to what really matters here? Oftentimes people lose themselves in stupid details, and purpose is one of those nice tools to overcome conflict in the team too, to go, hey guys, what are we really doing here? Right? This is what we're doing, right? And then those little conflicts go away as well. And purpose is another big word. I'd like to define it. For me, it's the combination of meaning, transformation, and impact. Right? Your personal why, what matters to you? Why do you do innovation? Right? What do you want to create? Why is it important for you? What is it shifting? Right? What is it transforming? Because if you're not really transforming something, then what are you doing? Right? You're changing something out there. Right? And ultimately, what's the impact in the big picture? Right? What are you really creating that's important out there? Because you could be the heroes of the future. In my mind, you already are, right? Because you're doing innovation. And of course, I have to say it, you and AI, right? Because it's not just us anymore. We have AI at our hands, and as innovators, super cool tool, very helpful, tons of tools for innovators, right? You can do your persona profile and customer market research, all that stuff. AI does a great job at that. Of course, when you do a persona profile with AI, it might be super good, but the difference is you didn't empathize with the person. Right? When you think about the person yourself and you come up with that persona profile yourself, it's you and you're thinking about them and you're already connecting to that person. The AI doesn't care. The AI just gives you the words that should be there. Now that said, use the tools, gets you 70% there. Just make sure you don't lose that emotional component, because AI will not replace innovators, but it will replace innovators who don't use it. Right? So use it to your advantage. It's there for you. Awesome tool, but it's just that. It's just a tool. Because you, in general, get to be the prototypes of what it means to be this new kind of human. Right? In that, be really kind to yourself. Right? Being an innovator is a tough job, as most of you probably know. Right? You're constantly being the odd one out, the freak, the different one, the ones with the crazy ideas, the one that is against the business. You know what I mean? So be kind to yourself, be kind to the world, because ultimately this is your legacy. Right? Marshall McLuhan said there are no passengers in Spaceship Earth. We're all crew. Right? And we're all crew, and this is your legacy. So thank you so much for your attention. I know I'm a couple of minutes over. I want to make sure we have some time for questions, but feel free to also connect and reach out to me anytime. Happy to share the slides with you if you want them, and any questions that you have are always welcome. As far as I'm concerned, we're on the same team already. So thank you again for inviting me today and for your attention.
Thank you so much, Philip. Please join me on a big round of applause for Philip. I think this was mind-blowing, to say the least. And I see a lot of reactions, people just reacting to everything you shared, and it's been great. So let's open it up for questions. Whoever wants to ask a question, you can open your mic or leave it in the chat. We have some time to do that. I do have a question, Philip. Just telling you a little bit about XPD. One of our biggest challenges regarding culture, I would say, is that we've been spreading all over the world. We have a lot of different offices, different countries, different cultures regarding each country. What would you suggest to strengthen the relationships between the different offices? Thinking that they speak different languages, they have different cultures, they have different costumes at different times. What would be your suggestion, like facing a challenge like this one?
Well, it's coming back to start with team human. You know, I mean, in the end, if you think about needs, no matter which culture you're in, we all need to eat, we all need to sleep, we all need to drink water, we all need to feel safe, we all need to feel valued and have our contribution be valued. We all have some very basic needs, right? And so really focusing on connecting on the human level, right? And that really deep level that we all have in common is one part. The other is celebrate the diversity. Right? Like, for example, have an evening where you introduce your food or your country or your culture or your folk dance or whatever it might be, right? Learn about each other, because that's the beauty of diversity. We don't want to make everybody look the same. That's not the point, right? We don't want everybody to be the same. That would be boring, right? And instead of that, to say, okay, cool, guy, how do you do this over there in Brazil? How do you do this over there in Argentina? How do you do this in Mexico? How do you do this in Germany? How do you do this in India, right? And learning about each other's cultures and learning about each other's foods, right? I mean, there's so many amazing things available in the world. I love food, for example, and around the world, like tasting these different things, and sometimes it's the same, slightly same, nearly the same spices. But Ras El Hanout in the Middle East is slightly different from garam masala in India, you know what I mean? And it's some of the same spices in there, but slightly different combinations and slightly different ways of treating them, and the food tastes totally different. And that's exciting, right? So I think really instead of looking at that as an issue, look at that as a gift, as an amazing, wonderful thing that we get to have this planet with different places and different traditions and different clothes and different whatever, right? Because in the end, we have to make some basic agreements, like, for example, around time. That's one of those things that's different in different cultures sometimes, but you have to say, hey, in our team, we're going to honor each other's time, we're going to be punctual. No matter if you're, you know, from South America or Middle East or from Germany, right? It's not a German thing to be on time, right? They think it is, but it's a human thing, right? We can have an agreement with each other around time. So you have to make sure that you have some baseline with each other, right? In terms of agreements that you can adhere to. But beyond that, enjoy the diversity in your community, right?
Thank you. Appreciate that. I see. Renato, please.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Philip. Thank you for your time. Great work. And yeah, happy to be here. So if you can summarize, then maybe based on your own experience, how can we make it easier to innovate? Or how can we make innovation easier?
Yeah. It's awesome. I love that question. Well, I think doing it. Right. I think that's part of it. Right. It's just like we learn anything. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Right. I've been learning Japanese for the last 265 days on Duolingo, and I still have no clue, and it's still hard, and it's still overwhelming as fuck. But I'm getting better every day. Right. And it's that growth mindset of like, hey, I'm getting better every day. It's not that I can do something or not do something, but I'm like, I'm getting better every day. And I think it's the same with innovation, right? It's like, in some ways, it's super hard, right? And especially in a big organization, it seems like the hardest thing in the world sometimes. And at the same time, look at a 5-year-old, right? Actually, if you look at that exercise of like, how many uses can you think of for a glass, right? You might have seen that creativity exercise or a brick or something, right? Kids outperform most adults. Kids outperform most innovation consultants, right? Because kids don't have all those restrictions in their head around what's not possible and what's difficult, right? And we've let ourselves believe that things are difficult because, yes, on the one hand, they are, right? Because you get more negative feedback or innovation pushing it in an organization. There's always this, oh yeah, we have to focus on cost cutting right now, right? And then it's like, okay, cool, let's use innovation for cost cutting. We can actually use that for that. It's not an either or. Right, if I feel bad for a lot of the people in the middle management who from the top get told, hey, you should do more innovation and we need to cut 5% of the P&L. Right, and then they go and say, oh shit, innovation, that's hard. I don't know how to do this, but I know how to save travel costs. Nobody's traveling anymore. right? Oh, yeah, 5% saved my P&L, right? So it's much easier to go that route than to go that route, or they do a little bit of innovation theater maybe, right? So in that sense, it's maybe harder, but in the end, life is hard, right? And you can think about what do you want to spend your time with, right? You can take the easy route and just say, hey, just tell me what to do and do the same thing every day, right? But then eventually that'll change too, and then you'll be out of a job, right? Or you can do the little harder one and do it repeatedly and try again and again and again. And as Daniela just said, innovation is a practice, right? It is a practice. It is something that you have to continue to evolve, continue to learn. And that's why you're all here, right? I think you're all out there helping your clients and supporting them in taking some of those baby steps, right? And at first it's hard, and you fall on your face a lot, right? But walking is controlled falling. Right? Even as an adult, you're actually technically always falling with every step. You've just learned how to deal with it. I mean, kids don't know that yet. And so it's practice, practice, practice.
Doing it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Let's go with Argelia.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Philip. I'm really happy to hear and to understand and to learn more about this. So thank you, and thank you, Fabian, also. My question was about what are the best practices that you can share with us in order to create a safe environment to practice about innovation and not be afraid about mistakes.
Okay. To not be afraid about what was the last word? Sorry.
Mistakes.
Mistakes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, mistakes.
Well, I think make them is really really helpful. Make mistakes, right? And then how you deal with how you make mistakes. This is coming back to having regular retros or having fuck up nights. You might have heard of the concept of fuck up night, where people present their worst innovation mistakes, right, and talk about it and tell what you learned about it, right? And by making it okay and by actually elevating it even to that point to say, hey, let's celebrate our failures, right? I mean, in one of the companies I was in, they had a big sculpture that got moved around from office to office for the fuck up of the week, right? So every week someone really fucked up and they gave them the big trophy, right? And so they got the big fuck up trophy. And then next week it went to some other team, and then went to some other team. And they also saw, hey, look, everybody fucks up, right? Everybody makes mistakes. It's normal, right? And in innovation, what helps is to create a special space for it, right? I mean, for example, at the moment I have 2 boot camps running with Siemens, where we have a 14-week program. And for these 14 weeks, the employees who apply to it, and they have to apply to it too, so it's not a forced program, but they want to come there, they spend 20% of their time in innovation. And we tell them at the beginning, hey guys, for the next 14 weeks, we have this safe space here. After that, you're out in the wild, right? That's what we call boot camp. Just like in the army, you're going to get some tools. We're going to help you build some resilience for when you get punched in the face. And then afterwards, you're going to be out in the wild. But having that little protective space, it's a little bit like when you're growing a plant. Right, when you have a new seed, you don't put it right out on the outside either, right? You keep it in a small little thing at first and let it grow there in a nice greenhouse. And when it's big enough, then you go plant it outside, right? And so this is a bit of that, making sure that you protect people specifically at the beginning, a little bit more. And in your team, as I said, celebrate the mistakes, learn together, right? Always focus on learning, right? To really come back to that. I never lose, I either win or learn. Right? And if you go back to that concept and really keep enforcing that, right? And really in your teams too, it's like, look at how you, and start with yourself, right? Look at how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake, right? Like my inner voice is an asshole. So it's a Nazi bastard. And I mean, when I make a mistake, the first thing that comes up, oh, you're such an idiot, Philip. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, yeah, I'm such an idiot. Oh, right? And I laugh myself, I laugh at myself a little bit. And that really helps, right? And really leading by example, right? Making fun of yourself, being a little bit of flippant about yourself and constantly making, it helps to the rest of the team to be like, oh, Angelina is also not perfect. She makes mistakes. Cool, then I can do that too, right? And so to really be transparent about it and share your learnings when you do make a mistake.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I think we're on time. Philip, thank you so much for sharing all this value. I think you just inspired everyone. Yeah, the ball is rolling. Let's create these safe spaces. Let's create the safe spaces for innovation. And we have a lot of work to do, but we're super inspired Thank you so much for your time, for sharing all the knowledge, and for inspiring us. Thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody here for being the brave heroes that are going out there to drive innovation. You are so key for our future. So thank you so much. And if you want the slides or you want to connect in any way, shape, or form, please reach out, LinkedIn, anywhere. Happy to connect. And yes, hashtag brave heroes. I love that as and thank you, brave heroes. Team Human.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.